You're watching EASD TV. My name's Vivienne Parry, and I have with me in the studio one of the most important people in this building here in Stockholm, Chantal Mathieu, Senior Vice President of EASD. Welcome, Chantal. It's always such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Vivienne, and welcome to you for another year of ESD TV.
Well, I have to tell you, I love it. I do love coming here, and it's so pleasurable to be with so many people again. And it's really a kind of different feel for EASD, isn't it? It's a hybrid program. Tell me a bit more about that and what it's meant.
Yeah, it's with great pleasure that we are hosting a face-to-face meeting again after 2 years of virtual meetings. But the world is different. The world is different out there, and the world is different for us. We learned that the virtual meeting has an enormous potential. We were already streaming our meeting before COVID, but now things are even different because we call it now a hybrid meeting with a full place of face-to-face, but also a full place of the virtual aspect. It's not just streaming the meeting. We also want interactivity, for instance, at the time of the short oral presentations.
Yeah, tell me a bit more about the short oral presentations, because or discussions, I think we call them, because that's really replaced the poster, which has been a stalwart of every session, every scientific congress the world over.
If you're in a plane going or on a train going to a scientific conference, you always see people with posters. You recognize it everywhere. So what we learned from our virtual meetings in the last 2 years is that actually the short oral pitches, where you have your poster or your evidence online, but you're allowed to present your science in 5 minutes, the bottom line, and then a lot of time for discussions, that was something we actually wanted to carry forward from our virtual meetings. And so that is the difference this year at ESD, namely short oral sessions, no more papers. It was also in our aspiration to be greener as a conference, we are very aware of our impact as a meeting on climate, with people traveling, etc. So we thought, what can we do different? So we tried to use less carpets on the floor, but also the short orals is one of our efforts. We don't have a full hall with boards full of paper posters, but we have the electronic style now with the short orals. And we do hope that for many young people, this is the opportunity to stand up for the first time in front of a crowd and present proudly their work and answer questions. And there we also invite interactivity from our virtual audience.
But will it disadvantage the early career researcher? Because one of the things that's most important about EASD is the way that networking goes on. This may be the opportunity as a young researcher for you to bump into, Michael Naut, for instance.
Yeah.
So some of the greats in diabetes and meet them one-to-one.
Absolutely. So that's really why we were so eager to go face-to-face again. And having a face-to-face meeting is so rich. Even today, you could already feel it during the industry symposia, bumping into people, the enthusiasm, the awe of the young people looking at the more established researchers, being able to interact with them, and again with the short orals and the real orals to present their work.
The thing that I've heard quite often is, aren't you tall when you're not on Zoom?
Exactly. So the remarks you have from people about how you look is very interesting, because we've been used to looking at people just for 1/3 of their height.
So we're talking about the impact of, I guess, the pandemic and what it's meant in terms of the way this Congress is run. But actually there's a bigger picture of the impact of COVID on diabetes itself, and that has been really considerable.
Yes, and I mean, we behave like if COVID has disappeared. It's not true.
Absolutely not.
It's still impacting on our healthcare systems, because I have to be honest, it probably already started before COVID, but COVID really accelerated the stress on our healthcare systems with people leaving the medical profession. In all of our countries, we are facing problems with finding enough nurses, other paramedic staff to get into our hospitals. And so we are facing delays in care. And for people with diabetes, this is very important, because we are such an intense team effort when it comes to the treatment of people with diabetes. It's a whole team you need. You need dietitians, you need nurses, you need podiatrists, etc. And so when these professions disappear, it's not good for the care of people with diabetes. And again, what we also know is that when it comes to COVID, people with diabetes are being hit worse than other people. And so it's a double hit. On the one hand, their usual care of diabetes not being happening, or happening in the way we want because some professions disappearing. And on the other hand, COVID still impacting on their level of disease, I should say.
And indeed, the other bit of strand of that is that people who did not have diabetes when they got COVID, suddenly getting diabetes after it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation, that, and we are watching this with eagle eyes. First of all, type 2 diabetes coming out because of a COVID infection, that we acknowledge, and we acknowledge already a year. But second, we're also keeping an eagle eye perspective on type 1 diabetes, where some evidence is there that there may be, well, there's not some evidence, there's evidence that DKA is more frequent upon presentation of people with type 1 diabetes. But we're also really keeping an eye out whether the incidence of type 1 diabetes is accelerating, because we do know that the SARS-CoV-2 virus is entering the beta cell. So we are really watching what is happening on the incidence of type 1 also.
And that brings me to research, because, where is EASD going with research?
Yes, so EASD in the future will for sure put a lot of emphasis on its core business, namely support of research, and on the other hand, education. And events like our annual meeting are the festival of research and education, and really all of our aspirations coming together. But research support for ESD goes further. You know that we have our foundation, namely the EFSD, where we support researchers in Europe and beyond.
And of course you're chair of that.
No, I'm the chair of the education. It's Koen Steehouwer, who is chair of the EFSD. It's Koen Steehouwer, who is chair of EFSD. And so with the EFSD, we put so much effort in really promoting research on diabetes in Europe and beyond. I am the chair of the Postgrad Education Committee, where we do a lot of effort on education, namely face-to-face education, like the Young Scientist Training course, the Clinical Scientist Training course, but also our big e-learning platform. The virtual platform, esd-elearning.org, now has over 80 modules in over 25 courses on different topics of matters that are important for clinicians and researchers in diabetes. And this is free, it's accessible from anywhere in the world, and it is now also, many modules are accredited by the Royal College of General Practitioners, and we are very, very proud of this platform, because it really is where we want to go with education in ESD. Our annual meeting, which is the festival of research and education, but also the education with our virtual platform.
And of course it's a virtual circle. You have your research presented, and if the research is good, you really need to get into practice as quickly as possible. Semaglutide is a prime example of that, getting people to understand what's going on, or time in range, or all those kind of things. So it's all of one thing, really. It's
Absolutely.
not separate.
Absolutely, and where we want to bring ESD in the future is not only be the instance that pushes research on diabetes in Europe and beyond, the instance that pushes education on diabetes, but we also want to take up our role as the instance that aids to implement everything we know from research in day-to-day clinical practice. And so one thing that we'll be launching next year, I can already tell you, is our Esd Guidelines. We didn't have guidelines until now. We want to make the guidelines now. We want to continue working together with other instances like ADA and IDF and ISPAT, for instance, on consensus statements, but we also want our own Esd guidelines. So it's really, I think, a very ambitious,
so full steam ahead,
a very ambitious future for ESD, going from supporting research, promoting research on diabetes, from education for the whole world to now also implementation in guidelines. And so a very, very busy couple of years in front of us.
So finally, Chantal, a smorgasbord of wonderful presentations here at EASD 2022. What are you particularly looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to some special symposia, like for instance the DDoC symposium, where people with diabetes themselves will have their voices heard in the middle of the ESD program. So that will be a very special session. Another interesting symposium will be the symposium by the European Diabetes Forum, which is like the policy forum of where ESD is also one of the members, where different entities come together. Again, the voice of the person living with diabetes through IDF, through ISPAT, through Société Francophone du Diabète. So many different instances, but also JDRF research. And so this EUDF Forum Symposium is again in the middle of this festival of science here at ESD. And finally, if I may, again, advertise for our Meet the E-Learning Expert sessions, 6 different sessions going on during the ESD, where people who have made modules for the e-learning platform will be present, chaired by a member of the Postgrad Education Committee, to present very briefly their module and then answer any questions that our clinical but also research friends could have about the module.
It sounds absolutely terrific. I know there's been a huge amount of work that's gone into this, so thank you very much. And you heard it here from Chantal Mathieu. Those are the sessions you really ought to be keeping an eye out for. Bye for now.